If you love great stories, you've come to the right place. Subscribe to my channel to make sure you don't miss any new videos. Like and share this video with your friends if you enjoyed it, and let me know your thoughts in the comments below. The Titan of Braavos usually stood as a symbol of defiance and strength, its bronze roar a greeting to the weary and the wealthy alike. But as the small, battered skiff carrying Jon Snow and Daenerys Targaryen drifted beneath its massive legs, the statue felt like a tombstone. The bronze was streaked with a strange, verdigris corrosion that looked, in the dying light, remarkably like the emerald stains of wildfire. Braavos was not the city Daenerys remembered from her youth. The canals, once bustling with the songs of bravos and the bartering of merchants, were eerily quiet. The colorful sails of the trading galleys were gone, replaced by the gray, salt-crusted hulls of ships that looked as though they hadn't moved in a year. "The Iron Bank," Daenerys whispered, her eyes scanning the fog-heavy skyline. "They were the ones who funded Cersei's dragons. They were the ones who bought the wildfire. If there is justice left in this world, it begins in the counting houses." Jon stood at the prow, his hand on Ghost's head. The wolf was restless, his nose twitching at a scent that shouldn't exist here. It wasn't the smell of salt or fish. It was the faint, metallic tang of sulfur. "Justice isn't what brought us here, Dany," Jon said. "We came to disappear, but it looks like the world we left behind didn't stay on the other side of the water." They docked in a secluded corner of the Ragman's harbor. As they stepped onto the stone quay, they weren't greeted by the usual throng of beggars and dockhands. Instead, they were met by a line of iron guard, men in heavy, black iron armor, their faces hidden behind masks that mimicked the cold, unblinking eyes of the Titan. "The city is under the mandate of the vault," one of the guards said, his voice muffled by the iron. "All foreigners must report to the House of Black and White or the Iron Bank. There is no trade. There is only the count." "What count?" Jon asked, stepping forward. "The count of the debt," the guard replied. "The Lannister gold was a poison. It flooded the vaults, but it brought a sickness with it. The Gilded Fever. Now the bank owns the air, and the people pay in silence." They were escorted through the streets. Braavos had become a city of ghosts. The courtesans were gone, the mummers' playhouses were boarded up. On every corner, the sigil of the Iron Bank, a single heavy coin, was painted in a sickly, luminescent green paint that glowed in the dark. Cersei hadn't just destroyed Westeros, she had economically decapitated Essos. By flooding the world with the blood-stained gold of Highgarden, and then incinerating the continent that produced the goods that gold was meant to buy, she had created a vacuum that was sucking the life out of the free cities. They were led not to a palace, but deep beneath the city, into the subterranean vaults of the Iron Bank. The air here was cold and dry, smelling of ancient parchment and cold metal. Sitting behind a massive desk of black stone was Tycho Nestoris. He looked a decade older than when he had stood in the Red Keep. His fingers were stained with ink, and his eyes were bloodshot. "The king in the north, the mother of dragons," Tycho said, his voice a dry rasp. "I should have you arrested for the loss of our investment. Thousands of ships, millions of dragons all turned to ash and glass." "You bet on a monster, Tycho," Daenerys said, leaning over the desk. "You knew what Cersei was. You knew she was building a pyre for the world, and you gave her the matches because you thought you could profit from the smoke." "We bet on stability," Tycho roared, slamming his fist onto the stone. "We bet on a queen who had the will to enforce order. We didn't know she would turn that order into a graveyard. And now, the bank is failing. The coins in our vaults are turning green, literally. The copper in the alloy is reacting to the wildfire residue that clung to the Lannister gold. Every time a coin changes hands, the Gilded Fever spreads." Tycho pulled a coin from a drawer and slid it across the table. It was a Lannister dragon, but it was covered in a fuzzy, crystalline green growth. As Jon reached for it, Tycho pulled his hand back. "Don't, it eats the skin. It starts with a cough, then a fever, and then you simply stop speaking. You become part of the silence. It's as if Cersei's final command was carried across the sea in the very thing people love most, wealth." Jon looked at the coin with a cold horror. She didn't just burn the world. She poisoned the future. Even here, thousands of miles away, she's still killing people. She's more than a ghost now, Tycho said, his voice dropping to a whisper. There are rumors in the streets. They say a gilded queen is rising in the east, that her spirit found a new vessel in the ruins of Valyria. They say she is gathering the shadows, those who were broken by her fire, to finish what she started. As they left the bank, escorted back to the harbor, a figure stepped out from behind a pillar. It was a man wearing the robe of a faceless man, but his mask was not that of a human. It was a mask of a lion, hammered out of thin, beaten gold. The many-faced god has been given a new name, the figure whispered as they passed. Jon stopped, his hand going to Longclaw. Who are you? I am the debt that remains, the figure said. The Silver Queen thinks she can sail to the east and find peace, but the east is where the shadows grow longest. The lioness is waiting in the smoking sea. She wants her children back. The figure vanished into the fog before Jon could move. Daenerys stood on the quay, looking out toward the dark horizon where the ruins of Valyria lay. She felt a phantom heat on her skin, the same heat she had felt when she watched the Red Keep explode. She's not done with us, Jon, Daenerys said. The silence wasn't the end. It was the incubation. We didn't escape the fire, we just carried it with us to a new shore. The Titan's head is lost in a thick, green-tinged fog. From the House of Black and White, a single, mournful bell begins to toll. The shadows in the east had arrived, and the dragon and the direwolf realized that the world was too small to hide from the ghost of a queen who had traded her soul for the sky. The transition from the narrow canals of Braavos to the jagged, obsidian shores of the smoking sea was like passing from a dream of winter into a fever of stone. The water here did not behave like the sea. It was thick, oily, and hissed as it lapped against the hull of their boat. Steam rose in sulphurous plumes from the depths, obscuring the horizon in a perpetual, sickly yellow haze. Jon and Daenerys were no longer alone. They had been forced to hire a crew of cinder walkers, men whose lungs were already scarred by the volcanic ash, and who feared nothing but the Gilded Queen. This is where the world began for my house, Daenerys said, standing at the bow. She had wrapped a silk scarf around her face to filter the stinging air. And this is where Cersei's ghost has come to hide. It's poetic in a way. She hated the Targaryens, yet she has fled to our cradle to build her grave. Jon looked at the water. Occasionally, a piece of debris would float past, not wood or bone, but shards of fused glass and ancient Valyrian steel, glowing with a faint internal heat. She didn't come here to hide, Dany, Jon said. She came here to find something. Qyburn's notes mentioned the heart of the flame. He believed the wildfire wasn't a new invention, but a crude imitation of the blood magic that lived here. As they navigated the shattered spires of Valyria, they saw them, the gilded scabs. These were the survivors of the fallout in Westeros, merchants, soldiers, and peasants who had been infected by the gilded fever. They had followed the rumors of a new sun across the sea. They lived in the ruins of the ancient dragon pits, their bodies covered in the crystalline green growth that Tycho Nestoris had described. But they didn't look like dying men. They moved with a terrifying, synchronized purpose. They were building something. Look, Jon whispered, pointing to a massive, half-collapsed dome. Thousands of the infected were hauling blocks of black stone, coating them in a mixture of gold and wildfire. They were constructing a monument, a jagged, spiraling tower that mimicked the shape of a dragon's wing, but was made entirely of Lannister-themed iconography. At the very top, a massive lion's head of beaten gold roared into the sulphurous sky. It's a beacon, Daenerys realized. She's calling the fire home. They were spotted. A group of gilded scabs, their eyes glowing with a faint, unnatural green light, emerged from the ruins. They didn't carry swords. They carried glass jars filled with the lion's blood. The mother of dragons has come to kneel, one of them cried out, his voice a rasping rattle. The Silver Queen has come to witness the true gold. I kneel to no one, Daenerys said, her hand reaching for the torch she used to light the way. And certainly not to the ghost of a dead tyrant. Dead, the man laughed, a sound that ended in a wet, green cough. The queen is not dead. She is the atmosphere. She is the heat in the stone. She is the gold in the earth, and she has found a voice. Before Jon could draw Longclaw, a figure descended from the high arch of the dragon pit. This was not a little bird or a common servant. This was a woman tall and lean, dressed in robes of shimmering gold and crimson silk that seemed to move even when there was no wind. She wore a mask, the same golden lion mask they had seen in Braavos, but this one was fused to her skin with wildfire scars. "You took a long time to follow the scent, Jon Snow," the woman said. Jon froze. The voice was familiar, yet distorted. It carried the rhythm of the north, but the arrogance of the south. "Sansa," Jon breathed, his heart turning to lead. The woman removed the mask. It was indeed Sansa Stark, but she was no longer the Lady of Winterfell. Her skin was unnaturally pale, and the gilded fever had crept up her neck in delicate, beautiful patterns of emerald crystal. Her hair, once the Tully red, was now a pale, ash blonde, the color of Lannister gold. "Sansa, what have you done?" Jon stepped forward, his sword tip dropping in shock. "I did what was necessary, Jon," Sansa said, her voice devoid of emotion. "You and the Targaryen girl were too busy being heroes to see what the world actually needed. You buried the wildfire, but you didn't realize that the wildfire is asterisk the world now. The people don't want freedom. They want a god they can fear. They want a queen who doesn't lie to them about hope." "Cersei did this to you," Daenerys said, her eyes flashing with a mix of pity and rage. "She poisoned you from the grave." "Cersei showed me the truth," Sansa corrected. She gestured to the massive gold and stone tower behind her. "I was in the crypts when the green fire hit Winterfell. I breathed it in. I felt it change me. I saw her in the flames, Jon. She didn't look like a woman. She looked like the future. She told me that the Starks and the Lannisters were two sides of the same coin, both destined to burn so that something harder could remain." Sansa walked toward them, the green crystals on her skin pulsing with a rhythmic light. "She is the gilded ghost. I am her hand. And together we are going to finish the silence. We are going to bring the green sun back to the surface, but this time it will be the only sun the world ever sees." "You're sick, Sansa," Jon said, his voice trembling. "The fever has taken your mind. We can help you. We can go back." "Back to what?" Sansa laughed, a sharp, cruel sound. "Back to the ash, back to the hunger. No, we are moving forward. The Iron Bank is ours. The faceless men are ours. The gold of Highgarden has bought the soul of Essos." She raised her hand, and the gilded scabs moved in, circling Jon and Daenerys. From the shadows of the ruins, more figures emerged, warriors of the Golden Company who had survived the North, their armor now gilded and glowing with wildfire ointment. "The debt is finally being called in," Sansa said. "The dragon and the direwolf must be sacrificed to light the beacon. Only the blood of the living can feed the gilded ghost." Suddenly, the ground beneath them shook. Not a volcanic tremor, but a deliberate subterranean explosion. From the cracks in the obsidian floor, the lion's blood, the concentrated wildfire, began to seep upward, surrounding them in a ring of emerald death. Drogon's absence was a physical ache in Daenerys' chest. For the first time, she felt truly powerless. They were trapped in the heart of the enemy's sanctuary, facing a sister who had become a monster and a ghost who had become a god. "Ghost!" Jon shouted. The white wolf lunged, but he wasn't attacking Sansa. He was attacking the wildfire canisters held by the guards. He knew, with an animal's instinct, that the only way out was to create a greater chaos. The smoke of Valyria turns a brilliant, toxic emerald, and as the spires of the ancient city begin to crumble into the smoking sea, Jon and Daenerys are lost in a whirlwind of ash, gold, and fire. The shadows in the east had finally stepped into the light, and they wore the face of the family Jon had tried so hard to save. The explosion triggered by Ghost sent a shockwave through the obsidian foundations of the dragon pit, but it was not the end. The wildfire did not merely explode. It hung in the air, a thick phosphorescent mist that made every breath feel like inhaling liquid glass. Jon Snow pushed himself up from the debris, his vision swimming in a sea of emerald. Across the courtyard, he saw Daenerys shielding her eyes, her silver-ash hair glowing in the chemical light. And there, standing untouched at the center of the ring of fire, was Sansa. The green crystals on her skin seemed to drink in the light of the explosions. She didn't look afraid, she looked completed. "You cannot kill a ghost with fire, Jon," Sansa said, her voice echoing with an unnatural, dual resonance, as if Cersei's sharp, haughty tone was vibrating just beneath her own. "The fire is what made us." The gilded scabs and the remnants of the Golden Company surged forward, but they were not fighting like men. They moved with a hive-mind precision, driven by the gilded fever that linked them to Sansa's will. Jon drew Longclaw, the Valyrian steel singing as it sliced through the air. Each time the blade struck a gilded soldier, a spray of green, glowing blood hit the stone, sizzling like acid. "Sansa, stop!" Jon roared, parrying a blow from a gilded captain. "Cersei is using you. She's a parasite, a poison. This isn't the North. This isn't home." "Home is a lie we tell children so they'll go to sleep," Sansa replied, walking toward him with a slow, predatory grace. She pulled a dagger from her belt, a blade of dragonglass hilted in Lannister gold. "The North is a grave. King's Landing is a grave. I am building something that will never die because it was never truly alive." She lunged at him. It wasn't the clumsy strike of a lady. It was the calculated movement of someone who had spent her life watching the most dangerous people in the world. Jon was forced onto the defensive. He couldn't bring himself to strike her with the lethal edge of Longclaw. She was his sister, the last of the pack. "She's gone, Jon," Daenerys shouted, fighting off 2 infected guards with a scorched iron spear. "The girl you knew died in the wildfire. Look at her eyes." Jon looked. Sansa's eyes were no longer the Tully blue. They were the cold, emerald green of a wildfire flask just before it shatters. As the battle raged, the massive gold and stone tower in the center of the pit began to glow. The wildfire seeped into the black stone, turning the entire structure into a giant, vertical wick. This was the heart of the flame that Qyburn had dreamed of, a beacon that would broadcast the gilded fever across the narrow sea, carried by the volcanic winds of Valyria. "If that tower ignites, the world stays silent forever," Daenerys cried out. She realized what she had to do. She didn't have Drogon, but she was still the unburnt. She was the blood of the dragon. She ran toward the base of the tower, ignoring the guards. She began to climb the jagged, gilded iconography. The heat was enough to melt lead, but Daenerys moved through it, her skin blistering and healing in a cycle of agony and magic. "Daenerys, no," Jon yelled, but he was pinned down by Sansa's relentless assault. "Let her go," Sansa whispered, her dagger grazing Jon's cheek. "She wants to be a martyr. Let her feed the flame. It's what her kind has always done." Jon looked at Sansa, and for a heartbeat, the gilded ghost receded. He saw a flash of the girl who used to sew in the Great Hall of Winterfell, the girl who wanted to be a queen of songs and stories. "I'm sorry, Sansa," Jon whispered. Instead of striking her with his sword, Jon dropped Longclaw. He stepped inside her guard and wrapped his arms around her in a crushing embrace. "The debt is paid," Jon said into her ear. He didn't kill her. He threw both of them backward, off the ledge of the dragon pit and into the churning, sulphurous depths of the smoking sea below. As they fell, Sansa's scream was a mixture of 2 voices, one of a terrified woman and one of a dying lioness. They hit the water, and the cold, salt-heavy pressure of the sea began to leach the heat from the green crystals. The gilded fever could not survive the absolute, crushing cold of the depths. At the top of the tower, Daenerys reached the gilded lion's head. She didn't try to stop the fire. She inverted it. Using a shard of dragonglass, she cut her own palm and pressed it against the lion's open mouth. The blood of the dragon met the soul of the wildfire. A dragon is a creature of asterisk living fire. Wildfire is the fire of asterisk death asterisk. When they met in the heart of Valyria, the reaction was not an explosion, but a collapse. The golden tower began to implode, the magic of the gilded ghost being sucked into the void of the ancient ruins. The green light faded. The gilded scabs fell to the ground, their connection to the ghost severed. The silence was broken, replaced by the natural, hollow sound of the wind. Hours later, the smoking sea threw two figures onto a black sand beach miles away from the ruins. Jon Snow dragged Sansa onto the shore. She was unconscious, the green crystals on her skin now nothing more than dull, gray scabs that flaked away in the wind. The gilded ghost was gone, forced back into the dark by the sacrifice of the living. Daenerys emerged from the mist shortly after. She was leaning on her spear, her clothes largely burnt away, her skin glowing with a faint, residual heat. She looked at the two Starks. "Is it over?" she asked, her voice a mere ghost of itself. Jon looked at Sansa, who was breathing steadily for the first time in years. Then he looked back at the smoking sea. The Tower of Valyria was a heap of rubble. The beacon was dark. "For now," Jon said. "But the gold is still in the world, Dany. The ash is still in the air. We didn't save the world. We just gave it a chance to die of natural causes instead of a Lannister's whim." The episode ends with the three of them sitting on the black sand of Valyria. They are the last of their kind, the last dragon, the last wolf, and the woman who had been the last lioness. They don't look like legends. They look like survivors of a wreck. Behind them, the sun begins to rise over the east. It isn't green. It isn't gold. It's a pale, honest orange reflecting off the water. "Where do we go?" Sansa asked, her voice finally her own, though it was heavy with the weight of everything she had done. "Further east," Daenerys said, looking toward the horizon. "Where there are no thrones, where the only gold is the sun." Thanks for watching this episode. Like, share, and follow for more interesting stories and narrations. Thanks a lot.